John, you keep trying to lure me into your Clinton GOP conspiracy theory. It's not going to work, John. But this video, however, because apparently you're not reading any of my publications and you're not listening to my videos, and so I'm having to tell them here on this channel. You're trying to express your knowledge about the Morgan situation. I already know all of it. I already know about Lucinda. I already know about the man she married. I already know. So, but as I read, I realize you are missing information that is essential for you to have in order to get the right understanding. So I'll go over your comments and make comment replies as we go. Because the other option would be to repeat what you're talking about, and I may or may not answer your information. So that's the situation I'm in. You made lots and lots of comment replies. So watch was hit. John Sullivan Fulmer? No, John Solomon Fulmer. But I don't see a question there, and you didn't finish the statement. You're just repeating it. So, kind of wondering what you're doing with that post. But there's the other William Morgan one. Oh, that one's not so long. If you recall, trying to figure out how to respond in the two different dilemmas. I don't want to make this a long video, is the main reason. So again, I'm just going to redo it and do a historical context reply. Remember that there are two main lodges. George Washington was of a different lodge. He was in the minority. The two main lodges were Scottish Rites and York Rites. The Brethren Adieu passage in the Book of Mormon that everybody gets wrong, they all focus on adieu. They leave out brethren adieu. A famous Scottish Rites Mason, Grand Master, I think, something like that, of high rank, left the lodge with his Brethren Adieu speech. That's the plagiarism that's being used in the Book of Mormon in that passage in Jacob. And that's how you know the key for interpretation of that passage, so that you see that, let's go to it, and we'll redo my video on Brethren Adieu. Jacob 7:27. It's actually 26 because it has an "and it came to pass." Those are code indicators, as everybody else mocks it as a joke, that it's not a Hebrewism, it's an incorrect usage, and it's so popularly used in the Book of Mormon, but that's why. And so 26, and it came to pass that I, Jacob means usurper. Remember what I talked about the Scottish Rites Masons. They were infiltrated by the Illuminati. And as the Scottish Rites in America, infiltrated by the Illuminati, were then going to infiltrate the government of America and rise up to power and usurp Jacob, the government. The mythological founder of the Scottish Rites his last name is Jacobite. So the use of Jacob in the Book of Mormon is purposely used as symbol for the coding that's going on here. And what you need to understand is this first Jacob, because when the kingmen destroy the Nephites, they establish their king and name him Jacob also. So that's the different Jacob. This is the brother of Nephi, or brother of Nephi, younger brother, and he was named after the biblical Jacob. So he's considered the good Jacob, and he's preaching to the people. He also preaches no polygamy. That's key for those of you who've left the Mormon Church, because the Brigham Church has told you that Joseph Smith was a polygamist. You, John, fall for that when you made your comments about Lucinda being sealed to Joseph Smith. That was done after his death, if it was done at all, if it wasn't done to somebody else. But Joseph Smith was not a polygamist. I know there's lots of documentation after Joseph died, and there were Bennett, who accused Joseph of raping the 14-year-old girl, and that's why he went to publish his article on the press that the town council, without Joseph Smith's presence and approval, then went and destroyed, but then Joseph got blamed for it and was arrested and put in Carthage. Everybody misses that. Everybody just believes whatever somebody tells them that they want to believe in. I've got another commenter who has that problem with a different type of issue. There's too much misinformation and disinformation in America right now. We are under attack. That's the first phase of attack, and it's been going on in America for a long time, and they've succeeded to this point to get Trump into office and to get him acquitted, to destroy America. They couped America. They usurped the government of America, and they are tearing apart the Constitution to turn America back into a monarchy. Those are the facts. That's not my beliefs. That's not my opinions. That's not me being a snowflake Democrat, of which I am not a Democrat. If you're not listening to my videos, you don't understand. And so back to Jacob. He began to be old, and the record of this people being kept on the other plates of Nephi. Remember that this is the 116 pages that had to be rewritten. Martin Harris destroyed the first writing of 116 pages, and Smith Sr., as I discussed, was furious with his son for blowing his opportunity to be a part of this. And then they had to go to Sidney Ridman with his Solomon Spaulding manuscript. And so this is what's coded here, is that there are two sets of plates that Nephi is writing. The one we have currently is the rewrite, the spiritual plates, as it's referred to, versus the more history of the people. In other words, it was William Morgan's tell-all book of the history of the Illuminati infiltrating the Scottish Rites and to take over America. The wars and contentions. And so, wherefore I conclude this record, declaring that I have written according to the best of my knowledge, by saying that the time passed away with us, and also with our lives passed away like it, as it were unto us as a dream. We being a lonesome and solemn people, wanderers, cast out from Jerusalem. The anti-Mason movement of 1826. Born in tribulation in a wilderness, and hated of our brethren, the Scottish Rites Lodge. Hated the York Rites because of the anti-Mason movement, which caused wars and contentions. Wherefore we did mourn out our days. And I, Jacob, saw that I must soon go down to my grave. William Morgan. Wherefore I said unto my apprentice, that's what sons are. They are apprentices of their father's business. Enos, take these plates. That's Oliver Cowdery, who took the plates, who was helping William Morgan transfer his manuscripts onto copper plates for the print press in Batavia. And I told him the things which my brother, Masonic brother, which would be the Master Mason of the place where he was arrested, Nephi, had commanded me. Master Masons are the ones in charge of the community. And he promised obedience unto the commands. And I make an end of my writing upon these plates, which writing has been small, because he didn't finish it. And to the reader I bid farewell, hoping that many of my brethren of the York Rites Lodge may read my words. Brethren, adieu. You see how that works? That's how you encode the Book of Mormon. Decode the Book of Mormon. And when you understand the correct church history, which Brigham Young did not understand the correct church history. He was out of the loop. He was baptized in 1833. And so even though he recognized Freemasonry in the Book of Mormon, and that he was a part of the infiltration plot to destroy America and establish his own kingdom, when he knew that he couldn't take America at that time, with the anti-Mason movement that stopped it. And then for most of the church under Joseph Smith, Andrew Jackson was president. And so they couldn't, the Scottish Rites Illuminati could not take over America during that time period. And so Brigham Young devised his own scheme, and in 1838 enacted it. It's what's the term when activating agents in the spy terminology? Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise has that. They get activated for duty. Okay. So Lucinda was his wife, William Morgan's wife, obviously. I'm not quite sure of how much she knew. The man you're talking about who married her was a York Rites Mason also, friend of the family, and so even though he was like 20 plus years older than her, she needed some man to take care of her, because that's how the culture was back then. It's not like today's culture. You can't apply today's culture on history. It doesn't work. And so as a widowed, because the courts finally declared William Morgan dead. That's why it took time for her to get the death certificate to be taken care of by someone else, because she can't be taken care of by someone else until then. And since George Harris was a fellow Freemason, it's the bond of Freemasons to take care of each other's families, and because of removing him from the United States, he could no longer have contact with Lucinda and his kids, and she had to accept that he was gone and dead. And so can't find the answer as to how much she knew, but the Smiths did take her in. She lived across the street in Nauvoo from Joseph Smith Jr. William Morgan was among the first that were baptized for the dead when they started it. And so the Batavian Press with David Miller, he was a York Rites Mason. He only obtained membership because of the scandal of him paying for the book to reveal all about Masonry. He was denied further advancement. But it didn't matter. The book that was published under William Morgan's name by the Batavia Press was his way of trying to generate revenue for the loss of the money that he gave to William Morgan to write his books, that investment. And so that was not William Morgan's intended book. If he was going to do a tell-all about Masonry, he had a number of ranks left to go that he didn't cover. He only did the first three, which were common in both the Scottish and the York Rites. And so again, we're left wondering, what is he disclosing? Is it the Scottish Rites or the York Rites? So again, it was clear that it was David Miller who wrote that much. And that much information was known to everybody anyway. Even those who don't become members are allowed to attend and witness the ceremonies for the rank advancements. And so anybody could know that information. Joseph Smith would have known that information by attending the several churches during that time period, which was not during the time period of the burned over district period, which was a little too soon. And so let's see, what else do I need to cover here? Do you mention, I doubt you mention it, I caught this from a descendant of his second wife after he left the country. William Morgan has a fantastic tale of how he survived. The ship that the Smith Senior's Masons, through the Mason York Rights communications network, put him on a boat, and that's where the sheriff's tracker lost him. The boat sank, and it was presumed that he had died. Unfortunately, fortunately, the ancestor tells of how he was picked up by a fishing boat and taken to one of the islands out there in the Caribbean, and lived there for a time. I think that's where he met his wife. I have to find the document of the ancestor, but he lived on the island for a while, worked as a fisherman, and then his fishing boat sank, and he was again rescued, and he then had the people took him and his family, or whatever the order, to Honduras, and there he became a banana plantation owner, and sold his bananas to America at a specific port of the York Rights Masons, so that it could be kept a secret. And obviously Lucinda could never find out about any of this. But then he lived a nice life, had another family down in Honduras. And the church, according to this guy, thinks that the church is on his side, because there's there's church stuff down there by his plantation in Honduras, and so I don't know. I think the kid is clueless as to his church history knowledge, and unaware that the Brighamite Church is actually spying on him, using the art of war tactic of keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So the church purposely went down there when they found out there was a Morgan, and established a base camp down there to spy, to find out information as to how much these Morgans know. And so lots of secret stuff going on, that's for sure. And so George W. Harris, being a York Rights member, let's see how you word this, because you're trying to pit family member against family member, Martin Harris against George Harris. And in addition to her 2 small children, she had to consider the fact that she had a long life yet in front of herself. You're telling a story now. Some anti-Masonic politicians were surprised at the timing of the marriage, having hoped she would have waited until after the 1832 elections. 1830 decision was not particularly surprising since her husband had been, in her view, abducted by the Masons more than 3 years before and murdered. Okay, so this was the dilemma I was faced with as to whether to reply or do a whole overview of the history. And I've already gone over 25 minutes. And so you're not identifying the distinction between the Mason groups, Scottish Rites, York Rites, and how loyal they are to each other, even with. See, you're making the assumption that everybody had decided in their minds. There was no body found. So he was not dead. He was just declared dead because he'd been missing for so many years, according to the laws that they had back then. Let's see. He wasn't abducted in the real story. The Masons who took him to Niagara Falls were the ones who were put on trial because they were the last ones seen with him, and yes, they accused them of abducting William Morgan, but they were actually rescuing him, fleeing him out of the country. He went to Canada first, and while he was in Canada, the York Rites members offered him a home and a horse to live out the rest of his days, or he could be snuck out of North America altogether, although Honduras is in North America, in Central America. And he chose not to stay in Canada, which is a good thing because they would have tracked him. The sheriff's tracker had made it up into Canada and found out about him being there, and then followed him to the ship. So he made the right choice in not staying up in Canada and taking that deal. But that's what Masons do. When there's a fellow Mason in need, they help them out. They give them a farm in the case of Joseph Smith Sr. When he became a Master Mason, they help widows, and they help secret people out of the country, providing them with a whole new life. And that's what happened with William Morgan. So he was not murdered. If you are familiar, the Tanners figured this out as much. William Morgan and Thomas Monroe. Monroe was the one wearing William Morgan's clothes, whose body was found in the water, the lake up there in Niagara. And so that was disturbing. They at first thought it was William Morgan because of the clothes, but his wife, Thomas Monroe's wife, said, "No, that's my husband. What's he doing dead? Why is he wearing those clothes?" And so that sort of blew up as a cover story. It's likely Thomas Monroe was going to spill the beans of William Morgan's still being alive. We don't know exactly. I would hope it's not a scenario where they said, "Okay, Thomas Monroe, you're a fellow Mason. We need you to pose as William Morgan and we're going to kill you." I hope that's not what they had to do. I hope it's a situation of they had no choice because he was going to narc on their plot, their plan. Okay. In addition to her small children, she had to consider the fact that... okay. So, no, you're not understanding historical culture. And you're making assumptive leaps for your narrative. And you're veering off course. So, anti-Masonic politicians, I don't know where you're getting that. If it was Martin Harris who had narked on his ancestor George for being a Mason, maybe, but there weren't in the way of murders of Masons. The anti-Mason movement was the burning of their temples. If there were skirmishes as Masons tried to defend the temples, there may have been those, thus the wars and contentions. But for the most part, the populace was furious of Masons in general, combining Scottish and York into one entity, which they shouldn't have done, but the news reporter who stirred up the populace purposely did that. So, no, it was the judge who had declared him officially dead because he'd been gone for so long, so that she could remarry in order to be taken care of with her kids. Because a widowed woman with kids needs to be taken care of. And so George Harrison, being a York Rites member, was friends with the family because they were York Rites. And so, yeah, they got together. He took care of her. Because you can't have a wife already, and George Harris didn't have a wife already to take care of. But yeah, Batavia, that was York territory. And see, you're not understanding why. It's like Joseph of Arimathea, who married Mary. She was a virgin, and he had children that needed to be taken care of. He can't, by the law of Moses, marry a widowed or single mother with kids. He had to marry a virgin, one who had not had children. And that's a similar type of situation here, is that women can't be there's no such thing as polygamy, anti-polygamy, remember? And so it had to be a guy who was well off rather than a young man who was just trying to start off in his life. So a big difference. Very little is known about his early life. Settled in the city. His name appeared in land records. His occupations. Silversmith or jeweler. When William and Lucinda arrived in Batavia, Harris housed them over his shop. Yeah, they knew each other. Lucinda had known George before nuptials. It was possible that she saw him more as a father. No, don't speculate. Stick to the facts. That's where you get in trouble with the Clinton GOP conspiracy, church conspiracy. No, don't. It is not possible. Don't do that. That's what Mormon apologists do. It could be true. Don't fall for that. No, it had nothing to do with father figure. She knew him. He knew her. He was not married. She was now technically widowed, according to the judge, and needed to be taken care of. That's all it is. Fellow Mason taking care of a fellow Mason's widow. And thus they had no offspring, because it wasn't for sex. No, they didn't disappear. Shortly after no, they didn't disappear. Yes, we do know what happened. They eventually, they ended up joining the church, so that the church could also take care of them. And they lived right across the street from Joseph Smith Jr. And William Morgan was among the first baptized. We do know what happened. They didn't disappear. They ended up following Brigham Young, which is why I think she did not know what was going on. Because if she had known what was going on, she would not have followed Brigham Young. So, that's what I suspect, is that they purposely had to keep it a secret from her. And thus she'd think, wasn't sure what to believe. But George was a Mason and knew the family, took them in, and as a duty of a fellow Mason married her. And so she wasn't against Masons for murdering her husband. And again, which Masons are you referring to? Or Scottish or York? So don't speculate. No, they didn't escape the media. So, Terre Haute, yeah. Okay, so you do know they did become Mormons. Alright. 1834, Pratt, on a mission journey between Missouri, they stopped at the Terre Haute and proclaimed to any who would hear the message. No! No! Remember, Orson Pratt's, I think, brother, Harley P. Pratt, was the one that was used by Sidney Rigdon to be the outward appearance of no connection between Sidney Rigdon and the Smiths with the making of the Book of Mormon. And so here again, they're using another Pratt to show that there's no connection between the Morgans and the Smiths. Come on, John. Stick to the facts. Don't put in this flowery stuff. All who'd hear the message of the restored gospel. No! He was purposely used to go on a mission there, to be the ignorant person, unaware of the whole big picture. just like Parley P. Pratt was used. This is their modus operandi. Oh man. See, they had to have paths crossed again, as you noticed. Far West Missouri. And so, yeah, of course, Joseph Smith Jr. and Sidney Rigdon visited. Sidney Rigdon was the leader of the church out there in Ohio, and knew the Pratts very well. 6th of November, a meeting was held to appoint a committee to survey lands for gathering. This time, presidency of John Whitmer and David Whitmer and Walter Phelps was beginning to... See, the Whitmers were all in-laws through Oliver Cowdery marrying David, the Whitmer's daughter, or sister. Pending first presidency of the church, pending on the difficulties they had to do. Apparently you're quoting LDSMormon.com, Morgan 2. I hope that's what it is. Because this doesn't sound like you, John. Struggle, which later culminated in the dismantling of the Zion presidency altogether and the excommunication of its members. No! This LDSMormon.com is a lie. So, alright. 42 minutes. John, don't forget William Morgan's widow married one of Martin Harris's relatives. I already went over that. In Wikipedia, don't trust Wikipedia for LDS Church information. It is violating Wikipedia's own rules for church information. The church has their finger on the information and are messing it all up. Don't trust Wikipedia for information about the church. Use it for pivoting points to search for information, but don't trust them for the information they give. The church has messed it all up. 1930, Morgan's widow married Julia Batavia, so this was 20 years older. Moved, became Mormons. Some historians believe Lucinda had become one of the plural wives of Joseph Smith. No! Joseph Smith never practiced polygamy. If she became a wife among the list, it was after Desdemona Fulmer, the sister of John Solomon Fulmer, of whom I am the third great-grandson, was sealed to Joseph Smith by Willard Richards, the recorder, under orders of Brigham Young to make it happen. Brigham Young threatened the women who were unmarried to stay and die or come with him into the desert to die by forcing them to be plural wives with Joseph Smith and with Brigham Young so that they could be taken care of. Remember, that's the culture back then. Women were helpless, needed a man to take care of them. I know in today's enlightened society where women have more freedoms and liberties than in the past, that was not the case back then. And so men could easily take advantage of women with extortion threats of polygamy, as Brigham Young did. So don't fall for this. The church lied to us. They confessed to lying. We cannot trust anything they tell us other than they lied to us. That's the only thing we can trust them for. So don't fall for it. he never learned. John. And take notes for something else I'm working on. And I need to go to the bathroom, and I can't do that unless I stop the video and then come back. I don't want to stop the video. So I'm getting frustrated. Continue to live. Yeah. She was sealed to him. Yeah. Don't trust Wikipedia. The church has their hands all over it. They not only had their hand in the cookie jar, they took the cookies and they just destroyed the cookies. They had no interest in eating the cookies. 50s they separated. Harrison died in 1860, excommunicated from the Mormons after ceasing practicing with them. Yeah, that they went with Brigham Young, and that's why I suspect that they had no clue as to what was going on. Even George, he was also kept out of the loop. So it was just a very tight group of people who knew about what was going on. And Joseph Smith Sr. was one of those people who knew. He was in the loop. He was the one that gave the orders. So, was reported to have joined the Catholic Sisters, blah, blah, blah. She worked at asylum. So, yeah, George and Lucinda at least recognized the Brighamite Church was wrong and wanted nothing to do with it. But, oh man. John. John. And so, yeah, I'm not going to comment on your Clinton POTUS church conspiracy.